The bright morning sun of New Arcadia glinted off the polished observation deck as Captain Mara Lynn gazed upward at the colony's clear blue sky. It was the kind of perfect day that made the hardships of terraforming seem worthwhile crisp air, with just the right hint of moisture gravity, calibrated to Earth normal, and the gentle hum of a thriving settlement below. 15 years since humanity had established this outpost, and already New Arcadia was becoming the jewel of Earth's expansion efforts. Captain Lynn. The voice of Lieutenant Arya Singh crackled through her comm unit. Command requests your presence immediately. Priority Alpha. Mara's moment of peace evaporated. Priority Alpha meant only one thing, a potential threat to the colony. On my way, she replied, already moving toward the transit tube that would take her to the command center buried beneath Capital City. The underground complex hummed with activity as Mara strode through security checkpoints. Personnel moved with the practiced urgency of a military installation on high alert. When she entered the central command hub, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Commander Xavier Reese, head of colony defense, stood before the main display with his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The normally unflappable officer's face was drawn with concern. Captain, he acknowledged her with a nod. 17 minutes ago, our deep space monitors detected multiple FTL signatures approaching New Arcadia. Format and emission patterns suggest non-human origin. Mara felt her pulse quicken. First contact. That's what they're claiming, Xavier tapped a command into the console. They began broadcasting this message across all frequencies 3 minutes ago. The main screen flickered, revealing a tall, imposing figure with sleek, reflective skin that shimmered with subtle iridescence. Vertical pupils sliced through amber eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with cold calculation. The alien wore what could only be described as ceremonial military garb, all sharp angles and metallic embellishments that spoke of a martial culture. Humans of New Arcadia. The alien's voice was rendered into flawless English by the translation matrix. I am Envoy Zythor of the Zynari Empire, extending greetings from the Eternal Throne. Our civilization has observed your recent expansion with great interest. As is customary when encountering developing species, we have dispatched a diplomatic fleet to formalize relations. The camera panned backward, revealing an ornate command bridge filled with similarly attired Zinari. Then, the view shifted to an external shot, and Mara felt her breath catch. A massive warship dominated the frame, its hull adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial engravings and weapon emplacements that dwarfed anything in humanity's arsenal. Behind it, partially visible, loomed the silhouettes of dozens more vessels. We will arrive in your orbit within 6 standard hours, Envoy Zythor continued. Prepare your leadership to receive us. The Zinari Empire offers the hand of civilization to those who recognize the natural order of the galaxy. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Lieutenant Singh was the first to speak. That wasn't a greeting. That was an intimidation tactic. Mara nodded grimly. 42 ships based on that partial view. All military grade. They're not coming to talk, they're coming to demand submission. The Confederation intelligence was right, Xavier said quietly. The Zinari do exist and they follow the expected protocol, show overwhelming force, then offer protection in exchange for resource rights and eventually full integration into their empire. Mara moved to the tactical display. Alert the defense grid, activate all orbital platforms, and contact General Hayes. It's time to implement Aegis protocol. Lieutenant Singh raised an eyebrow. Sir, are we certain once we reveal? We always knew this day would come, Lieutenant Mara cut her off. The Confederation defectors warned us years ago. The Zinari believe they're the apex predators of the galaxy. They think we're alone, unaware, and technologically inferior. Let them think that for exactly 6 more hours. As the command center erupted into coordinated activity, Mara retreated to her private office. She activated her secure terminal and entered a 12-digit code known only to 5 people in the entire colony. The screen illuminated with a simple message: verification accepted. Aegis contingency activated. For 3 years, New Arcadia had been preparing for this moment ever since the arrival of refugees from 3 different species, fleeing Zinari, protection. Together, they had built something the Empire couldn't possibly expect. Mara smiled thinly. The Zinari thought humanity would be impressed by their battleships. They were about to learn a valuable lesson about making assumptions. 5 hours and 43 minutes later, Captain Mara Lin stood on the bridge of the UNS Valor, New Arcadia's flagship defender. The sleek vessel had been constructed in secret orbital docks, using a combination of human ingenuity and Confederation refugee technology. It wasn't as large as the approaching Zinari warships, but size had never been the decisive factor in human military history. "All systems nominal, Captain," reported Lieutenant Singh from the tactical station. "The civilian population has been moved to shelter positions. Defensive grid is online but passive. The Aegis matrix is, well, as ready as Dr. Cho claims it can be." "Very good," Mara acknowledged, maintaining her composure, despite the weight of what was about to happen. Everything they had built on New Arcadia, the homes, the infrastructure, the promise of a new beginning for humanity, all of it now hung in the balance. The main view screen activated, showing the vast emptiness of space above New Arcadia. Suddenly, reality seemed to fold in on itself as space-time rippled and tore. The Zinari fleet emerged from FTL travel in perfect formation, 42 massive warships arranged in a 3-dimensional pattern that was both militarily practical and aesthetically intimidating. Leading the formation was a vessel twice the size of the others, its hull gleaming with golden inlays that caught the light of New Arcadia's sun. The Imperial Glory lived up to its name, a monument to power and technological advancement that was clearly meant to instill awe and fear. "They're broadcasting again," Lieutenant Singh reported. Envoy Zythor's face appeared on the screen, his expression one of practiced diplomatic condescension. "People of New Arcadia," he began, as promised, "the Zinari Empire extends its hand in friendship. Our fleet represents but a fraction of our civilization's might, brought here to demonstrate our sincerity and capability. The galaxy is filled with dangers that young species such as yourselves cannot comprehend. We offer protection, guidance, and a place within our grand alliance." Mara exchanged glances with Lieutenant Singh. The implied threat couldn't have been clearer if Zythor had simply pointed a weapon at them and demanded surrender. "Open a channel," Mara ordered. When the communications officer nodded, she stood straight and addressed the alien envoy. "Envoy Zythor, I am Captain Mara Lin of the United Nations ship Valor. On behalf of New Arcadia and humanity, I return your greetings." She paused carefully, choosing her words. "Your arrival is quite the spectacle, Envoy. Humanity appreciates directness. So allow me to be clear. New Arcadia is an independent human colony established under Earth authority. We are not seeking protection or absorption into any empire, no matter how grand." A flicker of surprise crossed Zythor's features before being quickly suppressed. Clearly, he had expected immediate deference in the face of such overwhelming military power. "Captain Lin," he replied smoothly, "perhaps you misunderstand. The Zinari Empire does not seek to conquer. We elevate, we protect. Throughout our 10,000 years of expansion, we have incorporated hundreds of developing species into our embrace, sparing them the harshness of galactic politics. The alternative is to face the void alone, a void filled with predators far less benevolent than ourselves." Mara maintained her diplomatic smile. "We appreciate your concern, Envoy. However, humanity has never responded well to threats, no matter how elegantly phrased." Threats. Zythor's voice carried a note of practiced offense. "I offer salvation. Look upon our fleet, Captain. This is but a diplomatic escort. The full might of the Zinari military comprises over 10,000 such vessels. We could have arrived with enough firepower to reduce your world to ash. Yet we come with merely enough strength to demonstrate our sincerity." Behind Mara, the tactical officer whispered urgently, "Captain, our sensors are detecting anomalies. The Zainari fleet there are more ships. They've been maintaining some kind of cloaking field." A cold anger settled in Mara's chest. So the display of 42 ships had been deliberate misdirection. The Zainari had brought additional concealed vessels, no doubt to ensure complete military dominance, should negotiations fail. Envoy Zythor. Mara spoke calmly, betraying none of her knowledge. "Your demonstration of power is indeed impressive. Perhaps you would consent to a demonstration of our own, a small test of your defensive capabilities, to help us better understand our potential benefactors." Zythor's expression shifted to one of amused indulgence. "By all means, Captain. If it would help you understand the futility of resistance, you may test our shields as you see fit." Mara nodded to her tactical officer. "Fire a single defensive laser. Low-yield target their forward shields." The Valor's defensive beam lanced out a flicker of concentrated energy that struck the Imperial Glory's forward section. There was no visible effect. The beam simply vanished upon contact with the massive vessel's shields. Zythor's smile widened. "As you can see, Captain, even your most advanced weaponry cannot penetrate our basic defensive systems. This is not meant to humiliate, but to educate. The galaxy is filled with dangers that require protection only we can provide." Mara maintained her composure. "Most educational envoy, your technology is indeed impressive. Perhaps we could continue this discussion in person. I would be honored to visit your vessel, or to host you aboard the Valor." The request seemed to please Zythor. "A sensible suggestion, Captain. I extend an invitation to you and a small delegation to board the Imperial Glory. We shall conduct proper diplomatic exchanges under truce conditions, as is befitting civilized beings." As the transmission ended, Lieutenant Singh turned to Mara with concern evident in her expression. "Captain, are you certain this is wise? Boarding their flagship places you directly in their power." Mara's eyes remained fixed on the image of the Imperial Glory. "We need to buy time, Lieutenant. Dr. Cho needs another 3 hours to fully calibrate the Aegis Matrix. Besides," she added, with a hint of a smile, "I'm curious to see what kind of people believe that intimidation is a valid first contact protocol." 2 hours later, Mara stood in the shuttle bay with her small delegation, Lieutenant Singh, Dr. Elias Cho, and 2 security officers. All wore the formal dress uniforms of the United Earth Defense Force, adorned with the distinctive emblem of New Arcadia, a stylized planet with a rising sun. Dr. Cho fidgeted with his collar, clearly uncomfortable with the diplomatic mission. The brilliant physicist had spent the last 3 years perfecting the Aegis Matrix, rarely emerging from his laboratory for anything resembling social interaction, let alone high-stakes alien diplomacy. "Remember, Doctor," Mara spoke quietly, "observe everything about their technology, but reveal nothing about the Matrix. As far as they know, we're simple colonists awed by their superior firepower." "I understand the mission parameters, Captain," Dr. Cho replied, straightening his posture. "Though I must emphasize again that leaving the Matrix calibration at this critical juncture is—" "Your team can handle the final adjustments," Mara interrupted gently. "Your presence here is invaluable. You'll recognize technological implications that the rest of us might miss." The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing a Zainari transport vessel that had just landed. Its design was sleek, yet ornate with flourishes that served no apparent practical purpose, a statement of technological superiority that allowed for aesthetic indulgence. 4 Zainari guards disembarked, each wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed under the bay lights. They positioned themselves in formation, standing at rigid attention as a 5th figure emerged clearly, a higher-ranking officer, based on the elaborate decorations adorning his uniform. "I am Sub-Commander Vexel," the officer announced with formal precision. "By command of Envoy Zythor, I am tasked with escorting the human delegation to the Imperial Glory. You will be accorded all diplomatic courtesies, as befits potential Protectorate representatives. Mara stepped forward. We accept your escort, Subcommander. Lead the way. The journey to the Imperial Glory took less than 15 minutes, but Mara used every second to observe the Zenari and their technology. The transport vessel's interior was a study in Contrast's functional military equipment, adorned with decorative elements that served no purpose beyond displaying craftsmanship. The Zenari themselves maintained rigid posture and spoke little, though their eyes constantly evaluated the humans. As they approached the massive flagship, Mara had her first true appreciation of its scale. The Imperial Glory was easily 3 kilometers long, its hull embellished with what appeared to be stylized historical scenes, depicting Zenari military victories. The message was unmistakable here, was an empire that celebrated conquest and domination as virtues. The transport docked in a cavernous bay, filled with smaller craft and bustling with activity. Hundreds of Zenari personnel moved with disciplined purpose, though many paused to stare at the human visitors with undisguised curiosity. This way, Subcommander Vexal directed, leading them through wide corridors lined with more historical murals. Each depicted Zenari ships, looming over different worlds, with smaller alien vessels either destroyed or in postures of submission. Your people have a rich history of interaction with other species, Mara observed diplomatically. The Zenari Empire has brought civilization to the chaotic frontiers of the galaxy for millennia. Vexal replied with evident pride. Those who recognize our benevolence thrive under our protection. Those who resist eventually come to understand the wisdom of cooperation. They were led to a grand antechamber, where several Zenari officers waited, each wearing uniforms denoting different fleet divisions. At the center stood Envoy Zythor, more imposing in person than he had appeared in transmissions. Up close, Mara could see that what she had taken for decorative patterns on his face were actually fine scales that caught the light as he moved. Captain Lin, Zythor's voice carried effortlessly across the chamber. Welcome aboard the Imperial Glory flagship of the benevolent expansion fleet. I trust your journey was comfortable. Most illuminating envoy, Mara replied with a respectful nod. Your vessel is impressive. A mere transport ship compared to our homeworld defenses, Zythor said, with practiced modesty that did nothing to disguise his pride. Please introduce your delegation. Mara presented Lieutenant Singh, Dr. Cho, and the security officers in turn. Zythor's gaze lingered on Dr. Cho with apparent curiosity. A scientist among military personnel. How interesting. The Zenari Empire values knowledge as well as strength. Perhaps Dr. Cho would appreciate a tour of our research facilities while we discuss diplomacy. I would prefer my delegation remain together, Mara replied smoothly. At least for this initial meeting. There will be time for specialized tours afterward, I'm sure. Something flashed in Zythor's eyes, respect perhaps at her diplomatic parry. As you wish, Captain. Please follow me to the Grand Council chamber. It is where we traditionally formalize new Protectorate arrangements. The Grand Council chamber proved to be an enormous circular room, dominated by a holographic display of the Zenari Empire, hundreds of star systems illuminated in a three-dimensional map that rotated slowly in the center of the chamber. Around the perimeter stood representatives from what appeared to be different Zenari military divisions, all watching the human delegation with careful assessment. Impressive, Mara acknowledged, studying the map. Your empire spans considerable territory. 342 star systems, Zythor confirmed with evident satisfaction. Each brought into the embrace of civilization, each contributing to our collective strength. New Arcadia would be the 343rd jewel in our crown. Mara circled the display thoughtfully. And all these worlds voluntarily joined your empire. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled Zenari officers. Zythor's expression remained diplomatic, but his tone carried a hint of condescension. Voluntary is a concept that evolves with understanding, Captain. Some worlds recognized our superiority immediately. Others required education regarding the benefits of our protection. All now prosper under Zenari guidance. I see, Mara replied neutrally. She noticed Dr. Cho studying the technical specifications, scrolling along the base of the holographic display, his eyes cataloging information with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Singh had positioned herself to observe the Zenari officers, subtly evaluating their weapons and stance. As a mark of special consideration, Zyther continued, "The Eternal Throne has authorized me to offer New Arcadia status as a primary protectorate, rather than a standard client world. This would grant your leaders limited autonomy in local matters, with Zenari oversight, primarily focused on defense trade and resource allocation." Generous, Mara acknowledged without commitment. "And what would New Arcadia contribute to this arrangement?" "Your world possesses abundant mineral resources and agricultural potential," Zythor replied matter-of-factly. "Standard tribute would include 30% of all resource extraction and agricultural production, plus specialized human labor for projects requiring your species' particular attributes." "I see," Mara said again, more coldly this time. "And if we were to decline this generous offer?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Zythor's diplomatic veneer remained intact, but his words carried unmistakable weight. "As I mentioned earlier, Captain, the galaxy is filled with dangers. Races far less benevolent than the Zenari. Without our protection, isolated colonies often fall prey to pirate slavers or worse. We would be deeply concerned for New Arcadia's future safety." Before Mara could respond, her comm unit beeped with an encrypted signal, the confirmation she had been waiting for. Dr. Cho's team had completed the Aegis Matrix calibration ahead of schedule. "Envoy Zythor," she said with newfound confidence, "before we proceed further, there's something you should know about humanity and New Arcadia." Zythor tilted his head, slightly intrigued by her shift in demeanor. "Please enlighten us." Mara activated her personal communication device, displaying a holographic image that expanded to match the size of the Zenari star map. It showed New Arcadia's orbital space, but now revealed something the Zenari sensors had apparently missed: dozens of vessels in strategic positions around the planet. "We are not as isolated as you believed," Mara stated calmly. "New Arcadia has formed alliances with several species, including some former members of your empire." Murmurs broke out among the Zenari officers as they recognized the ship designs vessels belonging to the Trellari, the Vindari, and the Corellian Combine, all species that had once been under Zenari protection. Zythor's composure cracked for the first time, his eyes widening in genuine surprise before narrowing in calculation. "Impossible. Our intelligence indicated no such alliance. Those races are scattered refugees, not military powers." "Your intelligence was incomplete," Mara replied simply. "For 3 years we have worked together, sharing technology and building mutual defense capabilities. The ships you see are only part of our combined fleet." "An impressive deception," Zythor admitted quickly, recovering his diplomatic poise. "But ultimately futile. Even with these surprising allies, your combined forces are no match for the Zenari Empire. Our main battle fleet could arrive within days and overwhelm any resistance." "Perhaps," Mara acknowledged. "But first let me show you something else your intelligence missed." She nodded to Dr. Cho, who stepped forward and activated a second holographic display. This one showed technical specifications for a device labeled simply Aegis Matrix. 3 years ago, refugees from the Trellari civilization shared with us the theoretical framework for a revolutionary defensive technology, Mara explained. Dr. Cho and his team refined it into something functional. Dr. Cho cleared his throat clearly, uncomfortable being the center of attention but determined to fulfill his role. The Aegis Matrix creates a localized gravity field that can selectively bend or disperse energy weapons. Unlike traditional shields which absorb or reflect, the Matrix redirects. The more powerful the weapon, the more effectively it can be redirected. Zythor studied the schematics with growing concern. An interesting theory, but surely untested technology cannot. It's been fully tested, Mara interrupted. In fact, there's an Aegis Matrix node currently active aboard this vessel. We brought it with us. The chamber erupted into alarmed voices as Zynari security officers moved to surround the human delegation, weapons drawn. You smuggled active technology aboard my flagship. Zythor demanded, his diplomatic mask falling away to reveal genuine anger. This is a violation of diplomatic protocol. No more than concealing additional warships behind cloaking fields during a supposed peaceful first contact, Mara countered evenly. We took appropriate precautions just as you did. The Matrix is purely defensive. It poses no threat unless you choose to attack. Zythor's eyes flashed dangerously. A demonstration seems necessary to determine the truth of your claims. He turned to one of his officers. Commander, target the human vessel Valor with a minimal energy pulse from our forward array. Sir, the commander hesitated. Even a minimal pulse from the main cannon would... Do it, Zythor commanded. Let us settle this question of technological superiority once and for all. On the holographic display, they watched as the Imperial Glory's massive forward cannon oriented toward the Valor. Energy built visibly at its focal point, a gathering storm of destructive potential. Mara remained calm, though Lieutenant Singh tensed beside her. Dr. Cho, please ensure the Aegis Matrix is functioning properly. Already done, Captain, the scientist replied, monitoring readings on his device. Field integrity at 100%. The Imperial Glory's cannon fired, releasing a blinding spear of energy that streaked toward the Valor. Everyone watched as the beam approached the human vessel, then impossibly curved away, at the last moment dispersing harmlessly into space. Silence fell over the Grand Council chamber. The Zenari officers stared in disbelief at the display, which showed the Valor completely untouched. Impossible, one of the Zenari commanders whispered. Oh, it's quite possible. Dr. Cho couldn't resist a note of scientific pride. The Matrix doesn't just protect individual ships. We can extend the field to encompass entire planetary systems if necessary. Zythor's face had gone completely still, his mind visibly recalculating the entire situation. You understand, Captain, that this demonstration changes nothing in the larger scope. The Empire... Mara interrupted firmly. Will need to reconsider its approach to diplomacy with New Arcadia and its allies. Your 42 visible warships, and however many cloaked vessels you brought, are indeed impressive, Envoy Zythor. But they're also effectively neutralized. She stepped closer to the Zenari envoy, her voice lowered for his ears alone. We could have kept the Aegis Matrix secret, waited until you attacked in earnest, and used it to destroy your entire fleet. That would be the Zenari way, wouldn't it? Overwhelming force, complete victory. Zythor's eyes narrowed fractionally. But that's not our way, Mara continued, raising her voice again for all to hear. Humanity doesn't seek domination, Envoy. We seek cooperation. Real cooperation, not the thinly veiled subjugation your empire offers. Our alliance with the Trillari, the Vindari, and the Corellians is based on mutual respect and benefit, not intimidation. She gestured toward the holographic display of New Arcadia and its defending fleet. You came expecting to find an isolated human colony ripe for incorporation into your empire. Instead, you found a hub of cooperation between species who have chosen a different path than eternal submission. The assembled Zynari officers watched their envoy, carefully waiting to see how he would respond to this unexpected reversal. The carefully orchestrated show of strength that had worked on hundreds of other worlds had failed, leaving them in uncharted diplomatic territory. Zythor drew himself up to his full, imposing height. You have certainly given the Empire much to consider, Captain Lin. Perhaps our standard diplomatic approach was premature in this instance. I believe, Mara suggested, that we should reset these negotiations entirely. Not as empire and subject, but as equals seeking mutually beneficial relations. A tense silence filled the chamber as Zythor considered his options. Finally, he gave a short, formal bow, the first genuine gesture of respect since their meeting began. "You have earned the right to direct negotiation, Captain Lin. The Zenari Empire acknowledges New Arcadia and its allies as independent powers, worthy of diplomatic consideration." It wasn't surrender. The Zenari were too proud for that. But it was a fundamental shift in the power dynamic. Mara could see calculations happening behind Zythor's eyes, the envoy already adapting to this new reality, and considering how to salvage advantage from an unexpected situation. "I propose we adjourn for 6 hours, Mara suggested. "Your staff will want to verify our claims independently, and I'm sure you have reports to file with your superiors. We can reconvene on neutral ground, perhaps one of our Trellari allies' vessels, to begin genuine diplomatic discussions." "Duh. Acceptable." Zythor agreed, his tone carefully modulated to hide any hint of defeat. "We shall meet again in 6 hours aboard the Trellari vessel of your choosing. Until then, Captain Lin." As the human delegation was escorted back to their shuttle, Lieutenant Singh leaned close to Mara. "They're going to contact their homeworld for instructions," she murmured. "What happens when they report that intimidation failed?" "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Mara replied quietly. "The Zenari Empire has expanded through fear for thousands of years. Their leadership will need to debate how to handle a situation their playbook doesn't cover. That debate buys us time to strengthen our position. And if they decide to simply bring in their main battle fleet," Lieutenant Singh pressed. Mara's expression remained confident but sober. "Then we'll face them with every resource we have. But I don't think it will come to that. The Zenari didn't build an empire by throwing good resources after bad. They'll reassess and adapt. It's what successful predators do when they encounter unexpected resistance." Back aboard the Imperial Glory Envoy, Zythor stood alone in his private chamber, composing his report to the Zenari High Command. His initial confidence had been replaced by careful calculation. The humans had proven far more resourceful than anticipated, and their alliance with former Zenari subjects represented a troubling development. Most concerning was this Aegis Matrix technology. If it performed as demonstrated, it represented a fundamental shift in defensive capabilities, one that could potentially undermine the Zenari military advantage throughout the sector. His report would need careful phrasing. Simply admitting failure would damage his standing with the imperial hierarchy. Yet exaggerating the threat could trigger a massive military response that might prove counterproductive. As he composed his message, Zythor reflected on the human captain's words. There was something in her approach, this insistence on genuine cooperation rather than domination, that nagged at his thoughts. It was alien to Zenari philosophy, yet he couldn't dismiss the evident success it had brought these disparate species. Perhaps there was something to learn here beyond simple military tactics. 6 hours later, representatives from New Arcadia, the Zenari Empire, and the allied species gathered aboard the Trellari diplomatic vessel, Harmonic Convergence. The meeting space had been arranged in a circular configuration, with all delegations seated, as equals a deliberate departure from the Zenari's preferred hierarchical arrangements. Captain Mara Lin represented New Arcadia, flanked by Lieutenant Singh and Dr. Cho. The Trellari Vendari and Corellian delegations each brought their own representatives, all former subjects of the Zenari, who had escaped imperial control and found common cause with humanity. The Zenari delegation entered last, led by Envoy Zythor. Though his bearing remained proud, there was a subtle shift in his approach, less overtly domineering, more calculatingly observant. "Before we begin," Zythor announced, "I am authorized to convey a message from the Eternal Throne. The Zenari Empire acknowledges the technological achievement represented by the Aegis Matrix and the unexpected alliance between New Arcadia and our former associates. In recognition of these developments, the Empire is prepared to establish diplomatic relations on adjusted terms." Mara noted the careful phrasing, not quite equality, but a significant retreat from their initial position of assumed dominance. "We welcome the Empire's flexibility," she replied diplomatically. New Arcadia and our allies are prepared to establish peaceful relations based on mutual respect and benefit. What followed was 4 hours of intense negotiation. The Zenari pressed for technology sharing arrangements, particularly regarding the Aegis Matrix. Mara and her allies insisted on recognition of territorial sovereignty and non-aggression pacts. Economic proposals were exchanged, military boundaries established, and cultural exchange initiatives tentatively approved. Throughout the process, Mara observed Zythor closely. The envoy was skilled, probing for weaknesses, while offering minimal concessions. Yet, there was something else in his manner, a genuine curiosity about the interspecies alliance that had thwarted the Empire's standard protocol. During a brief recess, Mara found herself alone with Zythor in an observation corridor overlooking New Arcadia below. "Your world is beautiful," the Zenari envoy remarked, his gaze fixed on the blue-green planet. "Much like our homeworld before industrialization claimed most of its natural spaces." "We've tried to balance development with preservation," Mara replied. "It's a core human value, though, one we haven't always honored in our history." Zythor turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I must admit, Captain, you have achieved something remarkable. Not the technology, impressive though it is, but this alliance. Species with different evolutionary paths, different cultural imperatives working in genuine cooperation." He paused. "The Empire has always assumed such arrangements to be inherently unstable, without a dominant force providing structure." "Perhaps that's been the Empire's fundamental miscalculation," Mara suggested. "Domination creates stability through fear, but cooperation creates stability through mutual benefit. The first lasts only as long as the fear remains. The second can endure indefinitely." "An interesting theory," Zythor replied noncommittally. "Yet history suggests that power imbalances inevitably assert themselves." "Only if power is the primary currency of interaction," Mara countered. "We've found that trust properly cultivated can be more valuable than power, more sustainable certainly." Zythor seemed about to respond when a Zenari officer approached, urgently speaking in their native language. The envoy's expression hardened momentarily, before returning to diplomatic neutrality. "It seems our discussions must continue another time, Captain," he said formally. "I have received new directives from the Eternal Throne that require immediate attention." As the Zenari delegation departed, Lieutenant Singh joined Mara at the viewport. "That didn't look like good news he received." "No," Mara agreed. "I suspect the Imperial hierarchy is divided on how to proceed. Some will advocate for bringing in the main battle fleet to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Others will recognize the potential cost of attacking a defended position with unpredictable technology." "And which faction do you think will prevail?" Lieutenant Singh asked. Mara watched the Zenari shuttle returning to the Imperial glory. "I don't know, but I suspect Envoy Zythor will have significant influence on the decision. He's seen us up close, evaluated our capabilities and resolve. His assessment will carry weight." The next 72 hours passed in tense preparation. The combined fleet of human and allied vessels maintained defensive positions around New Arcadia. The Aegis Matrix was fully deployed, its protective field encompassing the entire planetary system. Civilian populations remained in shelter positions, while military personnel stood at constant readiness. The Zenari fleet neither advanced nor retreated, maintaining their original positions in high orbit. Occasional communication signals indicated heavy encrypted transmissions between the Imperial glory and distant coordinates, presumably the Zenari homeworld or fleet command. On the fourth day, Envoy Zythor requested a private meeting with Captain Lin aboard a neutral monitoring station positioned between the opposing forces. With appropriate security precautions in place, Mara agreed. The station's conference room was sterile and functional, devoid of either human or Zenari cultural influences. Zythor arrived precisely on schedule, accompanied by a single aide, who carried an ornate ceremonial case. Captain Lin, the envoy, greeted her with formal correctness. I appreciate your willingness to meet under these circumstances. Of course, Envoy, Mara replied. I take it you've received new instructions from your government? Indeed. Zythor gestured for his aide to open the ceremonial case, revealing an official-looking document inscribed on what appeared to be metallic parchment. The Eternal Throne has deliberated on the situation at New Arcadia and reached a decision regarding our future relations. Mara maintained her composure, though her pulse quickened. This moment would determine whether New Arcadia faced an overwhelming invasion or a new diplomatic reality. After considerable debate, Zythor continued, The Imperial Hierarchy has authorized me to extend formal recognition to New Arcadia and its allied species as sovereign entities. This document contains the proposed treaty of mutual recognition and non-interference. He lifted the metallic parchment, allowing Mara to see the elaborate script covering its surface. Its terms are straightforward. The Zenari Empire acknowledges New Arcadia's territorial claims and sovereignty. In exchange, New Arcadia and its allies agree not to expand their influence into systems currently claimed by the Empire. Mara accepted the document, scanning its contents carefully. The terms were indeed surprisingly straightforward, with none of the hidden subjugation clauses she had expected. This is more reasonable than anticipated, Envoy. May I ask what swayed your government toward this resolution? Zythor's expression remained diplomatic, but something in his eyes suggested internal complexity. Several factors were considered. The Aegis Matrix technology presents an unknown variable in conventional military calculations. The alliance between humans and our former subjects demonstrates unexpected diplomatic capabilities. And the potential cost of conflict, even if ultimately successful, was deemed suboptimal from a resource allocation perspective. It was a carefully worded explanation that revealed little of the likely heated debates that had occurred within the imperial hierarchy. Mara suspected that Zythor himself had advocated for this more moderate approach, though his precise motives remained unclear. There is one additional matter, Zythor added, his tone shifting slightly. The imperial hierarchy has expressed interest in establishing a permanent diplomatic presence on New Arcadia and in hosting a corresponding human delegation on our homeworld. This would be the first such exchange in Zenari history with a non-protectorate civilization. Mara recognized the significance of the offer. Such an arrangement would be welcome, provided appropriate protocols are established to ensure mutual respect. Of course, Zythor agreed. The details can be formalized in subsequent negotiations. For now, the immediate question is whether New Arcadia will accept the treaty as presented. Mara studied the document once more. I am authorized to accept preliminary terms on behalf of New Arcadia, subject to final approval by our governing council. However, I must insist that any agreement extend equal protections to our Trilari Vendari and Corellian allies. That provision is included, Zythor confirmed, pointing to a specific section of the document. All signatory species are accorded the same status and protections. After a moment's consideration, Mara nodded. Then, I am prepared to accept these preliminary terms. New Arcadia welcomes the opportunity for peaceful relations with the Zenari Empire, based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. The formal signing ceremony took place the following day, aboard the Trilari vessel Harmonic Convergence, with representatives from all involved species in attendance. As Captain Mara Lin and Envoy Zythor applied their signatures to the treaty, a palpable sense of historic significance filled the chamber. This marks a new chapter in Zenari relations with other species, Zythor announced formally. The Eternal Throne recognizes the value of diversity in approach and philosophy, even as we maintain pride in our own civilization's achievements. It was carefully worded, maintaining Zenari dignity, while acknowledging a fundamental shift in their diplomatic stance. Mara recognized the skill involved in crafting such a message, one that allowed the Empire to adapt without appearing to surrender. New Arcadia and our allies welcome this new relationship, Mara responded. Together, we can build something stronger than any single civilization could achieve through dominance alone. The treaty signing was followed by a formal reception, where representatives from all species mingled cautiously. Cultural differences remained evident, the Zinari maintaining their rigid posture and formal mannerisms, the Trellari engaging in their traditional greeting rituals, humans displaying their characteristic mix of diplomacy and curiosity. Lieutenant Singh found Mara observing the gathering from a quiet corner. "It's working," she remarked with cautious optimism. 5 species who would normally be at each other's throats, actually engaging in civil conversation. "For now," Mara acknowledged. "This is just the beginning. Real cooperation will take years to develop, especially with the Zinari. They've built their entire civilization on the principle of inherent superiority. That won't change overnight." "But it's a start," Lieutenant Singh insisted. "A better one than anyone could have predicted when those 42 warships appeared in our orbit." Mara smiled slightly. "Yes, it is." Her gaze found Envoy Zythor across the room, currently engaged in conversation with a Corellian representative. The Zinari envoy maintained his diplomatic poise, but there was genuine attention in his posture as he listened to the former imperial subject. "What happens next?" Lieutenant Singh asked, following Mara's gaze. "The hard part," Mara replied. "Making this work beyond the immediate crisis. The Zinari will be studying the Aegis Matrix looking for weaknesses. Our allies will be watching for signs that this is merely a temporary tactical retreat by the Empire. Earth authorities will have their own concerns about our independent diplomatic initiative." "And you," Lieutenant Singh prompted. "What will Captain Mara Lin be doing?" Mara's expression turned thoughtful. "Building something that lasts. This treaty isn't just about preventing conflict. It's an opportunity to create a new model of interspecies, cooperation one, based on mutual benefit, rather than exploitation. If we succeed, it could transform this entire sector of space." 6 months later, New Arcadia hosted the first multi-species summit, a gathering unprecedented in known galactic history. Representatives from 27 different civilizations attended, including 12 species currently under Zinari protection, who had been granted observer status by the Empire. The summit took place in a newly constructed convention center in Capital City, its architecture deliberately incorporating elements from all participating species, a physical manifestation of the cooperative philosophy it represented. Vice Admiral Mara Lin, recently promoted, in recognition of her diplomatic achievement, stood at the main podium addressing the assembled delegates. Her formal uniform now bore the insignia of the United Defense Council, a new multi-species organization established to coordinate security matters across Allied territories. 6 months ago, many of us stood on opposite sides of a potential conflict, she began. Today, we gather as partners in a shared endeavor, building a region of space where strength comes from cooperation rather than domination, where diversity of approach is valued rather than suppressed, and where all species can contribute their unique perspectives to common challenges. From his position in the Zinari delegation, Envoy, Zythor watched the human admiral with calculated assessment. His own status within the imperial hierarchy had evolved in complex ways, following the New Arcadia incident. To some factions, he was the diplomat who had prevented a potentially costly conflict. To others, he was the envoy who had failed to secure a new protectorate for the Empire. The debate within Zinari society continued, traditionalists arguing for renewed military expansion, progressives a small but growing faction suggesting that the New Arcadia model might offer a more sustainable approach to interspecies relations. Zythor himself had become a pivotal figure in these discussions, his first-hand experience with the human-led alliance giving his voice particular weight. As Vice Admiral Lin concluded her address, Zythor rose to deliver the Zinari response. Walking to the podium, he was acutely aware of the historic significance of the moment. For 10,000 years, the Zinari had interacted with other species only as superiors to inferiors. Today, he would address them as nominal equals. The Zinari Empire, acknowledges the vision represented by this summit. He began choosing his words with diplomatic precision. While our civilization maintains pride in our own approach to galactic order, we recognize the value in exploring alternative models of interaction. The Treaty of Mutual Recognition has demonstrated that different philosophical approaches can coexist without necessitating conflict. It was a carefully calibrated message, neither embracing nor rejecting the cooperative model, but acknowledging its legitimacy as an alternative to Zenari dominance. For an empire built on the principle of inherent superiority, even this limited acknowledgement represented a seismic shift. Following the formal presentations, delegates moved to the Summit Plaza for a reception beneath New Arcadia's evening sky. The plaza had been designed with symbolic intent, a circular space where representatives could interact as equals, with no position of prominence or hierarchy. Standing at the edge of the gathering, Mara observed something that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Zenari officers engaged in apparently genuine conversation with Trellari scientists, human diplomats discussing cultural exchange, with Vendari artists, and Corellian engineers explaining propulsion concepts to interested listeners from multiple species. Dr. Elias Cho appeared at her side, still uncomfortable in formal settings, but determined to fulfill his role as head of the new multi-species technology exchange. "Remarkable," he commented, following her gaze across the plaza. 6 months ago, half these species were preparing for war. Now they're exchanging ideas about stellar cartography and cultural preservation. "It's still fragile," Mara cautioned. "The Zenari traditionalists are powerful, and our own alliance has plenty of internal tensions to navigate. But it's a beginning. A better one than we had any right to expect," Dr. Cho agreed. "The Aegis Matrix bought us leverage, but it's what you did with that leverage that made the difference. Technology alone wouldn't have created this." Across the plaza, Envoy Zythor stood in conversation with a mixed group of delegates, his formal diplomatic manner still evident, but subtly different from 6 months earlier, more attentive, less overtly domineering. Noticing Mara's gaze, he offered a formal acknowledgement before returning to his conversation. "Do you trust him?" Dr. Cho asked, following the exchange. "Trust isn't the right framework," Mara replied thoughtfully. "Zythor is a product of his civilization, just as we are of ours. He's loyal to the Zenari Empire and its interests. But I believe he's genuinely curious about our approach, perhaps even beginning to question whether dominance is the only path to security and prosperity." "And the Empire itself," Dr. Cho pressed. "That's the question that will define the next decade," Mara acknowledged. "Can a civilization built on conquest adapt to a model based on cooperation? Some Zenari clearly want to try. Others see our alliance as a temporary obstacle to be overcome when the tactical situation changes in their favor." As the new Arcadian sun set beyond the plaza, casting long shadows across the gathered representatives, Mara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The Zenari had arrived expecting to find an isolated human colony, ripe for intimidation and absorption. Instead, they had discovered a new model of interspecies relations, one that challenged 10,000 years of imperial philosophy. Whether this model would ultimately prevail remained uncertain. The Zenari Empire was vast and powerful, with deep cultural commitments to its way of life. The alliance of New Arcadia and its partners was still young and finding its way. Competing interests, historical grievances, and practical challenges awaited them all. Yet, as Mara watched a Zenari security officer and a human diplomat sharing observations beneath New Arcadia's emerging stars, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps the Zenari had been right about one thing: impressive battleships could indeed change the course of history, just not in the way they had anticipated.